teleSUR organization reported on Friday that the World Food Program has been unable to get food into Gaza for 11 days. The government of Nicaragua announced the breaking of diplomatic relations with Israel in rejection of genocide perpetrated by the Zionist army against the people of Palestine. The government of Venezuela strongly rejected the renewal of the International Independent Fact-Finding Mission by the United Nations Human Rights Council. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The United Nations reported on Friday that the World Food Program has been unable to get food into Gaza for 11 days. The international organization pointed out that vital aid lines in Palestine have been cut off in the north of the Strip, preventing access to food and affecting more than 1 million people in the region. The United Nations warned that the distribution of the last food reserves to displaced families will barely last 2 weeks. They also reported that due to the limitation, distribution points and bakeries in northern Gaza have been forced to close, and others are at risk of doing so. Also in Palestine, more than 20 people were killed after a new Israeli attack on the northern Gaza Strip. Dozens of injured and missing were reported as the Zionist regime shelled the town of Jabalia. Meanwhile, paramedics and rescue teams recovered the bodies of 4 members of the Nabham family from the rubble in the town of Bil Nahya, west of Jabalia refugee camp, following the Israeli airstrike that targeted the town. The bodies of the victims were transported to Kamal Adwan Hospital. The United Nations interim force in Lebanon denounced new Israeli aggressions against its facilities. In a statement, the entity warned about recent explosions against its headquarters in the Lebanese town of Nakura, which has been hit for the second time in the last 48 hours. The mission also emphasized that it was a serious incident. The entity reiterated that any deliberate attack against peacekeepers is a serious violation of international humanitarian law and of Resolution 1701, adopted by the UNIFIL mandate. Furthermore, the Israeli occupation forces shelled the Iranian field hospital of the Red Crescent on the Syrian-Lebanon border. In response to this crime, the Iranian government roundly condemned the new aggressions against the country's health system. Since September 23, Israel has intensified its attacks against Lebanon, killing more than 2,000 Lebanese, including children and women, and causing the displacement of more than 200,000 civilians inside the country and over 400,000 towards the Syrian border. Welcome back. The government of Venezuela strongly rejected the renewal of the International Independent Fact-Finding Mission by the United Nations Human Rights Council. Through a statement, Caracas described the mission as shameful and recalled that it was created by the government of the failed cartel known as the Lima Group, with exclusively political objective at the service of the government of the United States. Caracas condemned such a renewal of the mission, knowing that it is a clear sign of the misguidance of the institutions of the United Nations, denouncing also the inability to address real acts against humanity, such as the genocide in Palestine and the bombing of civilians in Lebanon by the State of Israel.
Señor Presidente, en 2019,
Mr. President, in 2019, the United States regime, the greatest violator of human rights in history, the European Union and the extinct Lima Group, designed this resolution with the purpose of applying what they called the maximum pressure on Venezuela through the manipulation of the tools and purposes of this council. They sought to impose a failed doctrine of regime change, which began by recognizing an imaginary acting government sworn in a public square, elected by no one, without popular support, to which no minutes were requested, but which nevertheless justified the overthrow of a popular government that the Washington regime did not like. Mr. President, 94% of the co-sponsors of this resolution acknowledged the imaginary acting government, without minutes and without election. Is there any doubt about the politicization of this document? Is there any doubt that its objective is not human rights?
¿Queda alguna duda de que su objetivo no son los derechos humanos?
The UN emphasized that voting against the fact-finding missions is a denunciation of the historical injustice that the peoples of the Global South have suffered.
Mr. President, the budget foreseen for the two mandates of this resolution is $8,995,500. That is to say, this document of interference supposes a daily expense of $12,322. How long will this Council allow the waste of money for politicized mandates that have no tangible or significant achievements in human rights cooperation? Finally, we do not recognize imposed resolutions. Voting against this political document is a denunciation of the historical injustice against the peoples of the Global South. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Latin America commemorates Indigenous Resistance Day in recognition of the indigenous people's heroism facing the Spanish colonization. The countries of the region remember the emblematic date according to their culture and idiosyncrasy, such as in the case of Bolivia, where the Day of Decolonization exalts the recovery of its people's self-determination. Meanwhile, Ecuador seeks to make visible the impact of Spanish colonization on the Day of Interculturality and Plurality. The date represents for the peoples of the region the rescue and vindication of anti-imperialist struggles. And in Venezuela, a heartfelt ceremony was held at the National Pantheon to commemorate 532 years of indigenous resistance. Vice President for Politics, Citizen Security and Peace, Diosdado Cabello, led the ceremony together with representatives of the indigenous peoples. The hoisting of the tricolor flag in the National Pantheon, they honored the martyrs of the struggle against the Spanish invasion in 1492. During the day, rallies and debates and a decolonial and intercultural perspective are expected to take place. In Colombia, the Bolivar Square in the capital was the scene of two activities that reflect the reality of a country marked by violence and political persecution. Our colleague Hernán Tobar with the details.
Survivors of the leftist political party Patriotic Union, victims of paramilitary political violence of the state, leaving at least 521 forced disappearances, 3,170 extrajudicial executions, 1,526 displacements, 64 cases of torture. In the face of local impunity, the victims resorted to international justice and in compliance with the order of the International Court of Human Rights. The state must recognize its responsibility for the extermination of the Patriotic Union.
They lasted many years killing us, persecuting us for thinking differently. More than 6,400 victims also from the Patriotic Union, and of course many union leaders murdered, social leaders, also the students, the housewives.
Líderes sociales, también los estudiantes, las amas de casa. Todos nuestros líderes estaban siendo.
All our leaders were being military targets, and now there is another context, because it is a coup against the president, in which some organs of justice are involved, especially some high courts, and well, we also have the National Electoral Council.
Y también tenemos, pues, el Consejo Nacional Electoral.
In this space also converge precisely some social sectors that chose the progressive political alternative represented by President Gustavo Petro, today pointed out and persecuted by the strategy of legal warfare that seeks to remove him from the presidency. A war against thinking and acting differently from the oligarchies that has claimed victims and that now through legal means seeks to undermine democracy in Colombia.
Our presence here is to tell the National Electoral Council that what they are committing is a crime and therefore obeys dark political motives in that they are violating the law and are giving a coup d'etat to President Gustavo Petro.
En cuanto que están violando la ley y le están dando un golpe de estado al presidente Gustavo Petro Urrego,
who was elected by all Colombians in clear and clean elections. which no country in the world dared to put on trial.
Que ningún país del mundo se atrevió a poner en juicio.
Y el Consejo Nacional Electoral.
The National Electoral Council will have to retract all those things it is saying and the notification it sent.
Esa notificación que mandó.
Because they do not have the capacity nor are they authorized by the Constitution to point the finger at the president.
De señalar al presidente.
Unfortunately, these actions, which were expected to be attended by President Gustavo Petro, were not possible due to the health problems of the president. The acknowledgement of responsibility by the state to the victims of the Patriotic Union will be rescheduled for a new date, and the mobilizations in support of him and his government will continue to take place in the country.
teleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. In the United States, nearly 2 million homes are still without electricity 48 hours after Hurricane Milton passed through the state of Florida, while 17 people died after the cyclone hit. According to information provided by the portal poweroutage.us, approximately 1.9 million families and businesses were without electric service in the countries of the central west coast of the state the most affected. The state's governor, Ron DeSantis, declared that the death toll could rise as rescue efforts are still on their way to finalize the total number of victims. The onslaught of Hurricane Milton also left floods and hundreds of homes destroyed. In addition, in a statement to the media, President Joe Biden said that the material damage was $50 billion.
Experts estimate that is in its early estimates. It could be more, could be less, but estimates that it's caused damages around $50 billion from Hurricane Milton alone. Just alone, $50 billion.
In Kenya, people rallied in Kilifi against a proposal to build the country's first nuclear power plant near the coastal town. Protesters affirmed that the nuclear facility would disrupt economic activities such as fishing and ecotourism, the main sources of income for residents. They also denounced that they were not informed or consulted at any stage of the process. Demonstrators warned of possible displacement caused by the construction. The proposal is part of Kenya's long-term strategy to reduce its reliance on hydroelectric and fossil fuel energy sources by 2034.
We say that this project has a lot of negative effects. There will be malformed children born out of this place, fish will die, and our forest Arabuko Soko, which is known to harbor birds from abroad, will be lost, and the nuclear plant will cause us more harm than the benefits.
Our main source of income here is ecotourism. We depend on the environment. We host only East African coastal forests. We host the Watamu Marine Park. We host the largest mangrove plantation in Kenya. We do not want nuclear to come and mess up our ecosystem.
It will kill fish. I have been a fisherman for 20 years. I survived by fishing, and if they erect a nuclear plant here, the breeding sites for fish will all be destroyed and won't exist.
In India, traditional folk theatre offers a stage performance in New Delhi on Ram Lila, which tells the religious epic of Ramayana. This activity is a dramatic reenactment of the life of Lord Rama, who is celebrated during the Dussehra festival as the vanquisher of the mythological demon Ravana. In the scenes, the performers wear crowns and ornated costumes who keep the audience captivated with narration, melodramatic dialogue, dances, and songs, usually with a live orchestra using local instruments. Ram Lila is one of the most symbolic tales of the Hindu religion, which tells the story of the exile of Lord Rama with his wife and brother, as well as the abduction of the woman by the demon king Ravana and the great battle to rescue her. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.